Imagine you are an ancient human waking up beside a cold fire somewhere in Ice Age Europe. Your blanket is an animal hide that still smells faintly like the animal, your kitchen is a rock, and your bathroom is the entire landscape. Privacy is less of a concept and more of a scheduling problem. You spend the morning cutting raw meat with a stone flake. Then you scrape dirt from a root, poke at an infected cut on your leg, swat a fly off your face, and hand a piece of food to your child. Same hands. At no point do you pause and think, perhaps I should wash these before lunch. Instead, you wipe them on your thigh, which is already serving as a towel, napkin, toolbox, and probably several other departments. To us, this sounds horrifying. We live in a world of antibacterial soap, touchless dispensers, and people who carry enough hand sanitizer to survive the collapse of civilization. But ancient humans were not simply careless, stupid, or committed to living like a walking petri dish. They faced a much stranger problem. Dirt was visible, blood was visible, rot smelled terrible. Parasites moved. But bacteria and viruses were completely invisible, and invisible things are difficult to blame for diarrhea, fever, infected wounds, or the sudden death of someone who seemed healthy 3 days earlier. So when did humans first begin washing their hands? And why did it take so long for us to connect clean hands with disease prevention? The answer does not begin with soap. It does not begin with doctors. It does not even begin with civilization. It begins with disgust, grooming, muddy water, and a brain trying to avoid danger using only what it could see, smell, and feel. Which, to be fair, is not a terrible system. It just has one microscopic flaw. Long before humans understood germs, we already had something that behaved like a crude biological alarm system. Disgust. Disgust is the reason spoiled meat smells offensive, bodily waste inspires immediate retreat, and a stranger coughing directly into your mouth feels less like social bonding and more like an assassination attempt. It is not a medical textbook inside the brain. It is more like an anxious security guard making decisions based on appearance. Slimy? Suspicious. Rotten smell? Absolutely not. Covered in flies? We are leaving. This instinct probably helped our ancestors avoid obvious sources of infection, even though they had no idea what infection actually was. A carcass crawling with insects could be dangerous. Feces near a sleeping area could attract parasites. Cloudy water could make people sick. Humans did not need to understand bacteria to notice that certain things were followed by pain, vomiting, fever, or death. But disgust has limits. It reacts strongly to things that look contaminated, not necessarily things that are contaminated. A clean-looking hand can carry pathogens. A clear stream can contain parasites. A beautifully roasted piece of meat can still be handled by someone who just touched animal intestines. To an ancient brain, invisible danger was barely danger at all. Before regular hand washing could become a habit, humans also needed reliable access to water. That sounds simple until you remember that prehistoric life did not come with plumbing, sinks, faucets, or a cheerful bottle labeled Mountain Breeze antibacterial. Water had to be found, carried, guarded, and sometimes shared with animals. In dry environments, drinking came first. Cleaning your hands was a luxury when dehydration was standing nearby with a stopwatch. Even near rivers and lakes, washing was not automatically useful in the modern sense. Dipping muddy fingers into water removes visible dirt. It does not necessarily remove grease, microbes, or material trapped beneath fingernails. And if everyone drinks, bathes, urinates, cleans tools, and processes animals near the same water source, the river is not exactly functioning as a certified wellness spa. Still, early humans were excellent groomers. Like other primates, they picked debris, insects, and parasites from hair and skin. They scratched, rubbed, scraped, rinsed, and wiped. Social grooming also strengthened bonds. Removing a tick from someone's back was personal hygiene, medical assistance, and friendship maintenance in one convenient package. Hands were cleaned when they became uncomfortable, sticky, bloody, or visibly filthy. Sand could scour the skin. Leaves could wipe away grease. Ash could absorb oils. Water could rinse off mud. None of this required germ theory. It required only the revolutionary observation that having animal fat between your fingers is annoying. But there was still no universal reason to wash before eating, after handling waste, or before touching a wound. The essential ingredients existed: disgust, grooming, water rubbing, and memory. What was missing was the invisible connection. Our ancestors knew that dirt could be unpleasant. They did not yet know that a hand could look perfectly clean while quietly carrying the reason everyone in camp was about to have a very bad week. The first meaningful hand washing probably did not begin with health. It began with annoyance. Imagine an early human finishing a meal of roasted marrow, crushed roots, and whatever else could be obtained without being kicked, bitten, or poisoned. Their fingers are coated in grease, ash, plant sap, and tiny bits of food. This is not immediately fatal, but it is deeply inconvenient. Greasy hands collect dust. Sticky hands attract insects. Bloody hands smell interesting to predators, which is rarely the kind of networking opportunity you want. So the hands get wiped on grass, rubbed with sand, scraped against bark, or rinsed in a stream. Not because someone has discovered sanitation, because lunch is still attached to them. This distinction matters. Humans often discover useful behaviors for completely different reasons than the ones that later make them important. Fire may have been valued for warmth and protection before its full culinary potential became obvious. Clothing may have started as insulation before becoming fashion, status, and the reason closets are somehow never large enough. Hand cleaning likely followed the same pattern. Water immediately removes mud, blood, and loose debris. Sand creates friction. Ash absorbs grease and, when mixed with animal fats under the right conditions, can contribute to soap-like chemistry. Certain crushed plants release compounds that foam or help lift oils from the skin. None of this requires a chemist. It only requires curiosity, repetition, and one person noticing that a particular leaf works better than wiping your hands on your own hair. Some cleaning may also have emerged through food preparation. Grinding plants, butchering animals, opening shellfish, digging roots, and handling hides all leave residues behind. Strong smells can transfer from hands to food. Bitter sap can irritate the mouth or eyes. Touching your face after cutting certain plants can produce a prehistoric version of discovering chili pepper contact lenses. A memorable lesson. Rinsing before handling something delicate may therefore have developed as practical knowledge. Not wash to remove pathogens, but wash because the last thing you touched makes the next thing taste terrible. Wound care offered another route. If dirt inside a cut caused pain, swelling, or delayed healing, people may have learned to rinse injuries and clean their fingers before touching them. They would not have understood why this sometimes helped. They only needed to recognize a pattern. But patterns are difficult in a prehistoric world. A person might handle raw meat and remain healthy. Another might drink from the same stream and become violently ill. Someone might wash carefully and still die from an infection. Without microscopes, controlled experiments, or written records, cause and effect looked less like science and more like an argument between invisible forces. Humans filled those gaps with experience, tradition, and superstition. Maybe one family avoided touching food after handling waste. Maybe another rubbed ash onto their hands before preparing meat. Maybe a healer washed before treating wounds because that was how the previous healer had done it. The practice could survive even when the explanation was wrong. And explanations were probably very wrong. Bad smells might be blamed. Spirits might be blamed. Curses, weather, angry ancestors, suspicious neighbors, or that one person everyone already disliked might be blamed. Microbes had excellent legal representation. Still, accidental discoveries accumulated. Water removed visible filth. Friction improved the result. Some materials cut through grease. Cleaner hands felt better, smelled better, and sometimes seemed to reduce irritation. The habit was being assembled piece by piece. Humanity had discovered how to clean hands long before it understood why clean hands could save lives. Here is where archaeology enters the story, carrying a small brush and some disappointing news. Hand washing is almost invisible in the archaeological record. A stone knife can survive for hundreds of thousands of years. A ceramic bowl can remain buried long after the person who owned it has become part of the local soil. But a prehistoric human briefly rinsing their fingers in a stream leaves behind approximately nothing. No fossilized splash, no hand-shaped certificate reading, washed before dinner. This means archaeologists must work indirectly. They look for objects and structures associated with grooming, bathing, water management, food preparation, medicine, and waste disposal. These can show that ancient people cared about cleanliness. They cannot always tell us what was washed, how often, or why. Combs, for example, reveal that people removed tangles, debris, and parasites from their hair. Some ancient combs have even preserved lice or their eggs between the teeth, which is both scientifically valuable and an extremely unpleasant bonus feature. Tweezers, scrapers, cosmetic tools, and washing vessels offer more evidence that human bodies received regular maintenance. Ancient people were not wandering through history completely unaware that dirt could be removed. They groomed themselves, treated skin, cleaned teeth, arranged hair, and attempted to evict the tiny creatures living rent-free on their bodies. But grooming is not the same as infection control. Large settlements make the evidence clearer. Once humans began living in permanent communities, water and waste became engineering problems. Wells, bathing platforms, drains, and channels appeared in several early urban societies. Cities of the Indus civilization, including Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, are especially famous for sophisticated water systems, bathing areas, and covered drainage. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, built more than 4,000 years ago, is one of the most impressive examples. It was a carefully constructed brick tank with stairs, waterproofing, and drainage. Clearly, water mattered. What happened inside it is less clear. It may have been used for ritual purification, communal ceremonies, bathing, or some combination of these. Archaeology provides the pool. Human interpretation provides several thousand years of arguing around it. Early written civilizations also left recipes and records involving fats, oils, ash, and alkaline substances. Some mixtures were soap-like, but they may have been used for washing textiles, treating skin conditions, processing materials, or cleaning objects rather than for routine hand washing. This is an important warning. Finding soap-like chemistry does not mean finding a modern bathroom routine. An ancient person could bathe, perfume their hair, clean their clothing, and still prepare food without washing their hands after handling waste. Cleanliness was often judged by visible dirt, odor, comfort, beauty, social status, or religious purity. Microbial safety was not yet part of the equation. Even written instructions to wash the hands must be interpreted carefully. Washing before prayer, entering a sacred place, performing a ritual, or approaching someone powerful does not necessarily mean people understood disease transmission. The action may have been physically useful, while the explanation remained spiritual or symbolic. And for prehistory, before writing, the uncertainty becomes even greater. We have containers that held water. We have tools for grooming. We have settlements designed around drainage. We have evidence that humans fought dirt, smell, parasites, and bodily discomfort with considerable creativity. What we do not have is the moment someone first looked at their hands and thought, "These appear clean, but they may still be dangerous." That idea leaves no artifact. Only consequences. So why did humans not simply figure this out sooner? Because the evidence was a mess. Suppose 3 people eat the same meal. One gets sick that evening. Another becomes ill 4 days later. The third feels perfectly fine and spends the week announcing that everyone else is weak. Was it the meat, the water, the person who prepared it, a parasite acquired months earlier, a poisonous plant, an infected cut, or divine punishment for making fun of the chief's new fur hat? Without microscopes or controlled experiments, every explanation had roughly the same amount of visible evidence. None. There is also a tempting theory that prehistoric humans did not need much hand washing because they lived in small, mobile groups. There is some logic here. Many infections spread more easily when large numbers of people live close together, repeatedly contaminating the same water, food, soil, animals, and surfaces. A mobile camp is not a city. There are no packed streets, overflowing drains, livestock pens beside bedrooms, or public door handles being touched by 4,000 people before lunch. When a small group moves, it can leave some waste and contamination behind. But this does not mean hunter-gatherers lived in a disease-free outdoor retreat. They handled carcasses, blood, feces, soil, insects, parasites, wounds, and unsafe water. They suffered infections. Children touched everything, because apparently that tradition is older than civilization. Small populations reduced the opportunities for certain diseases to persist, but they did not create an invisible force field around dirty fingers. Water availability probably mattered too. Washing costs time and energy. In a wet environment, rinsing your hands may be easy. In an arid landscape, every mouthful of water can require travel, carrying, and planning. Using precious drinking water to wash hands after touching something unpleasant might have seemed as sensible as cleaning your driveway with bottled water during a drought. Then there is immunity. People sometimes imagine ancient humans as biologically tougher, as though everyone in prehistory had an immune system made from leather and motivational speeches. They were exposed to many microbes and parasites, and surviving individuals could develop immunity to particular infections. But exposure is not the same as invincibility. Ancient humans experienced high infant mortality, infected wounds, intestinal disease, and illnesses that left little or no trace on bones. Archaeology preserves dramatic injuries surprisingly well. It is much worse at recording the week someone spent dying from severe diarrhea. Another possibility is that disgust did most of the necessary work. Humans avoided rot, foul odors, visible waste, and diseased individuals. This behavioral immune system probably reduced some risks. But disgust is an imperfect detective. It produces false alarms. Harmless things can look revolting, while dangerous contamination can look completely clean. Fresh water may contain pathogens. A healthy-looking person may transmit disease. A hand can appear spotless 5 minutes after touching something hazardous. Our instincts were designed to notice clues, not microorganisms. Culture could improve those instincts by preserving useful rules. Do not prepare food near waste. Do not touch certain bodies. Wash after particular activities. Avoid a contaminated place. Yet, cultural rules could also preserve useless restrictions or attach cleanliness to morality, class, gender, and ritual status. A person might wash carefully before speaking to a god, but not before helping with childbirth. That sounds irrational only because we know the ending. For most of human history, washing was trying to solve the wrong mystery. People understood that dirt, smell, decay, and sickness were connected somehow. They just did not know which connection mattered. And when civilizations finally made washing systematic, they did not begin by declaring war on bacteria. They made it sacred. Once humans built cities, dirt became more than an inconvenience. It became a category. There was ordinary dirt, the kind attached to feet, tools, animals, and children. Then there was symbolic dirt: blood, death, childbirth, disease, forbidden food, contact with outsiders, or anything else a society decided could make a person spiritually dangerous. This was a major upgrade in the history of washing. A hunter rinsing grease from his hands was solving a practical problem. A priest washing before entering a temple was crossing an invisible boundary between the ordinary world and the sacred one. Same water, much higher stakes. Across early civilizations, purification became part of religious life. Priests washed before approaching gods. Worshippers cleansed themselves before ceremonies. Sacred statues were washed, dressed, anointed, and fed as though they were living beings with extremely demanding personal assistance. In ancient Egypt, temple service required purity. Priests came close to divine images, offerings, and sacred spaces, so bodily cleanliness carried religious importance. Washing was not merely about removing mud. It prepared a person to stand in the presence of a god. Mesopotamian traditions also connected fresh water with purification, healing, and protection from dangerous supernatural forces. Ritual specialists used water, incantations, and prescribed actions to remove contamination that might be understood as spiritual, magical, or moral. This sounds distant from modern hygiene, but the behavior itself could still produce real benefits. A priest who washed repeatedly may have removed pathogens without knowing they existed. A community that separated polluted spaces from sacred ones might accidentally reduce exposure to waste. A rule requiring cleansing after contact with a corpse could lower certain risks, even when the official explanation involved ritual impurity rather than decomposition and bacteria. Correct behavior. Incorrect user manual. Washing also became social currency. Clean skin, scented oils, groomed hair, and fresh clothing could communicate wealth and status. Water required labor. Oils and perfumes required resources. Servants, private bathing spaces, and specialized containers were not available to everyone. Being visibly clean could announce that you did not spend the entire day standing inside a livestock enclosure. Civilization had invented luxury branding. Public bathing later became central in several societies, most famously in the Greek and Roman worlds. Baths were places to wash, exercise, conduct business, exchange gossip, and discover that one acquaintance who could turn a casual conversation into a 40-minute speech. But bathing culture should not be confused with modern sanitation. A city could build enormous bath complexes while still lacking a correct theory of infectious disease. Shared water, crowded facilities, reused cleaning tools, and poor waste management could create new opportunities for transmission. Humans had become very good at organizing water. They still had no idea who else was swimming in it. Medical washing developed slowly alongside ritual practice. Healers cleaned wounds, used wine, oils, honey, plants, or water, and sometimes washed themselves or their instruments. Some treatments genuinely helped. Others were elaborate ways to make an infection feel ceremonially important. The key change was repetition. Ritual turned occasional cleaning into a rule. It connected washing with specific moments. Before eating, before prayer, after contact with death, before entering sacred ground, or before touching something socially important. These rules were not germ theory, but they trained societies to see washing as meaningful. And that mattered. Because once a behavior becomes habitual, it can survive long enough for its explanation to change. Humans first washed to remove discomfort. Then they washed to remove impurity. Eventually, they would wash to remove disease. The hands stayed the same. The invisible story attached to them kept evolving. By the 19th century, humans had built hospitals, medical schools, surgical theaters, and an impressive collection of confident explanations for disease. Most of them were wrong. Doctors often moved from autopsies to patients without washing their hands. Not because they were monsters, but because they did not believe clean-looking hands could carry death. A physician could appear respectable, educated, and professionally dressed while transporting infectious material from a corpse directly into a maternity ward. Then Ignaz Semmelweis noticed something disturbing. In the 1840s, women giving birth in one clinic at Vienna General Hospital were dying from childbed fever at much higher rates than women in another clinic. The difference was not prayer, weather, or the emotional sensitivity of the building. Medical students in the deadlier clinic also performed autopsies. Semmelweis required them to wash their hands with a chlorinated solution before examining patients. Death rates fell dramatically. This should have been the moment everyone applauded, changed their habits, and gave Semmelweis a very large office. Instead, many doctors resisted. Accepting his conclusion meant accepting that physicians themselves were killing patients. It also required belief in a mechanism that had not yet been fully explained. Germ theory would later provide that explanation, and experiments by scientists such as Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch helped show that microorganisms could cause disease. The invisible story finally became visible. Handwashing changed from a ritual of purity into a tool of prevention. Soap, clean water, hospital protocols, public health campaigns, and eventually alcohol-based sanitizers turned an ancient act into one of medicine's simplest defenses. Simple does not mean automatic. Even today, people forget, rush, perform a 2-second ceremonial splash, or assume that visibly clean hands are actually clean. The prehistoric brain is still involved. We respond strongly to slime, odor, and stains. Invisible contamination remains emotionally unimpressive. That is the strange answer to why ancient humans did not wash their hands as we do. They did wash them. They rinsed blood, rubbed away grease, scraped off mud, groomed parasites, purified themselves for gods, and cleaned before ceremonies. What they did not have was the idea that healthy-looking hands could carry living agents too small to see. They were not ignoring obvious science. The science was not obvious. Every time you stand at a sink, you are performing a behavior assembled across an enormous stretch of human history. Primate grooming, practical rinsing, ritual purification, urban engineering, medical observation, and microscopic discovery. Your ancestors had water. They had ash. They had disgust. What they lacked was the final explanation. So the next time you wash your hands before eating, remember that you are not simply being modern. You are completing a prehistoric experiment that took humanity thousands of generations to understand. And unlike the ancient human from the beginning, you have a towel that is not also your pants.